Hey vinyl community and all my music loving friends, it's MGK Boston Mike back with another video. It's been several weeks since I put up any videos on YouTube. Just been a little preoccupied getting ready for the Boston Marathon. That's 3 weeks from this coming Monday, so it's kind of been all consuming with my spare time, and I'm exhausted. And when I do listen to music, I just really don't have the motivation to put together a video. But I was listening to some music last night along a common theme, and I thought, hey, this stuff's easy to talk about. I'm pretty familiar with it. So I'm going to do this video. It's going to be called 10 plus 1 80s recommendations from yours truly. So that period, as I've mentioned in some of my previous videos, if you've watched my videos or subscribed to this channel, that was when I was a teenager and then into my university years throughout the decade that we know and love. It's the 1980s. So from middle school, I went from Kiss and Journey into straight up alternative and new wave. That was my main focus. I didn't really deviate from that. Maybe a splash of heavy metal here and there, some reggae once I got into university. But my main focus was alternative, new wave, and some punk rock as well. So anyway, there's obviously more than 11 records that I could pull, but these are just some selections I was listening to last night, and they're all great. So again, I couldn't keep it at 10, so like Spinal Tap guitar amplifiers, this list will go to 11. So 10 plus 1, that's the title of the video. So anyway, kicking things off, might have mentioned these guys before. This is ABC with frontman Martin Fry, there he is. These look like the cover of this album, I think, were stills from a music video they made at the time. This was released in 1982. You could call ABC kind of part of the new romantic movement at the time, lumping other bands, I suppose, like Human League to a certain degree, and inspired by David Bowie, Roxy Music in the 70s, right down to the style of dress. Like there's Martin Fry, of course, he's wearing a suit and tie, straight out of the David Bowie, Brian Ferry fashion recommendations, if you will. But yeah, he has a great voice. So ABC, this first album was again, that's why it's on this list. It's really excellent. Had some solid commercial appeal. Again, a few singles on this actually were in the top 40 at the time. I'm not a big top 40 guy, but when it's good, it's good. Of course, yeah, things kick off. Well, no, it doesn't kick off. This is side 2. There's The Look of Love, and they were on the Mercury label, as you can see. Other songs to note on this: Show Me, Poison Arrow, Tears Are Not Enough. It's a nice ballad. But he's just got a really great voice. And again, I mentioned Brian Ferry. It's just because they're so comparable in their style. And the instrumentation on this record is really fantastic. Of course, there's a small string section. So yeah, it's smooth. It's really good pop music. ABC, The Lexicon of Love, 1982. And these are in no particular order. It's not like a top 10 where I'm counting down to number 1. They're all equal in my opinion. So here we have, there's great Mike Scott, lead singer of the Waterboys, of course. This is Waterboys, this is The Sea. The release date on this is 1985. They're from Edinburgh. I always say Edinburgh, Scotland. I don't know, I always mispronounce that city. Anyway, that's where they were from. And there's of course, there he is. That's a great photo of him. And other core members, of course, Anthony Thistlethwaite on saxophone, and of course, Carl Wallinger on bass and keyboards. And they had a couple other guys. I'm not sure the drummer's name, but these are the core members. Pretty large band and ensemble. And yeah, there's Mike Scott again. So Mike Scott was just a brilliant songwriter. If I was to categorize these guys, it was kind of like a Celtic folk rock. It's a fusion, but it's a fusion of Mike Scott's poetry, arena rock, super big sound in the same vein, as a Phil Spector wall of sound. I mean, big sound on this record. You put this on, you really want to turn it up. It's just when I say a big sound, it's just really full, great instrumentation, great singing by Mike Scott. You just can't go wrong with this. This was their third album. They had a self-titled debut, and then there was an album before this called Pagan Place. I have those on compact disc. But of course, this was the original album I bought at the time when this came out. Of course, there's a really nice lyric sheet on the inside. Some kind of old photo on there. So, this is The Sea, the Waterboys. Yeah, Medicine Bow, Be My Enemy, Old England's a really beautiful ballad. Trumpets. This is, again, one of those, it's front to back every track, as I say, and that certainly applies to this. And of course, the title track, This Is the Sea. It's just a beautiful song. Don't Bang the Drum. The big single on this, of course, was The Hole of the Moon. You may have heard that before, but Beyond the Hole of the Moon, of course, a great single on its own. The rest of this record is just, yeah, it's stellar. It's really stellar. One of my favorites of all time, actually. I put this on a Desert Island list. So the Waterboys, This Is the Sea, 1985, the release date on that. Next band from Manchester, England, called the Chameleons. Another favorite of mine. This was their debut, Script of the Bridge. Definitely a pinnacle of the whole post-punk movement at the time. This came out in 1983. And to say they succeeded with this debut would be like saying that Shakespeare had a good book with that Hamlet play that he did. I mean, it's just, I can't overstate it enough that how highly I recommend this record. Yeah, and there's a note on the back here from Mark Burgess, who's the lead vocalist. They did the 3 albums, and then I have a bootleg live, but then they disbanded. They have reformed recently in the past, just before the pandemic. They were touring, and I believe they're going out on the road again this summer, I think in the UK festival circuit. They're now known as, instead of Chameleons UK, they're now called Chameleons Vox. Now, I did look up a couple of videos, some live clips from when they were touring. I want to say 2018, 2019. But Mark Burgess, sadly, I think his voice is just shot. I probably wouldn't go and see them at this point. But again, on this one, let's pull this out here. See, we're on the MCA label. So you can see the first track on this, Up the Down Escalator, comes in hot and they don't let up. It's up-tempo, low-tempo. Again, it's post-punk kind of style. I don't know who I'd compare them to today. I suppose a band like Interpol, if you're familiar with Interpol, from New York City, who are kind of, I think they would count as their main influences, Joy Division and the Chameleons UK. Certainly if you listen to the Chameleons, certainly this album anyway, and then dive into the first couple of Interpol albums, the similarities, yeah, can't be avoided. But anyway, Script of the Bridge, some other tracks on this, Monkey Land, A Person Isn't Safe Anywhere These Days, Don't Fall is excellent, Pleasure and Pain, and of course they rounded off with Second Skin. That's got a little slower tempo to it, but it's really great. And there's Mark Burgess there in a photo. He was, of course, the lead vocalist, as I mentioned. Again, Chameleons, Script of the Bridge, release date on that, 1983. So probably over a year ago, at least, year and a half ago, when I started this vinyl community stuff, my very first video I did were 3 80s bands that I considered critical, and those bands were The Cult, Simple Minds, and Chameleons UK. And in that video, if you look it up, you'll see that I highlight, I'm a bit of a completist with all of those 3 artists, or 3 bands rather. So I walked through most of their catalogs. So again, 3 Essential from the 80s. You can look that up if you're subscribing to my channel. All right, next, where are we at here? Number 7, again, in no particular order. Actually, at number 8, because this list is 11. This is the Cure, of course, and they were well into their career at this point. This was released in 1985. This is their 7th studio release. Until this point, they had a bit of a cult following, but this really was a breakthrough for them, of course, with the help of MTV in the United States and in Canada, where I'm originally from. Much music, of course, videos like the lead-off track on this, In Between Days. There's a great video for that one. Close to Me, that's a really excellent video too for that. Back when videos were a thing, and I really did enjoy music videos, and I still do. I'll still look them up on YouTube. But other highlights on this, a song called Push. It's got a real slow build to it, then it really kicks in. A Night Like This is an excellent ballad. Screw is good. Yeah, Kyoto Song. Robert Smith really at his peak here, in my opinion. Everything after this was, you know, they had their moments. There were a couple albums after this that were good. Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me comes to mind. And I can't think of the one in 89. Anyway, I hate that. Brain freeze. But anyway, Head in the Door. This is The Cure, and the release date on this again, 1985. Side note on Robert Smith, the lead vocalist and guitarist for The Cure. I just thought I'd throw this in. As I've said before, if something's pertinent to the subject in my video, I'll throw it in. This is an album by Susie and the Banshees. Release date on this one, I think this was 1984, right before that Cure album came out. So as you can see here in the credits, you can see there, Robert Smith on guitars. Let's see if you can zoom in on that. Yeah, guitars and keyboards both. So yeah, he sat in on the recording of Hyena with Susie and the Banshees, and he actually toured with them on this tour. It was a one-off. They were friends, him and the band, of course, and this is another great album. Of course, they were on Polydor, on compact disc, obviously. Some of the highlights on this, like Dazzle, Belladonna is a great tune, Running Down, Bring Me the Head of the Preacher Man. Look that one up. That's an excellent one. But yeah, I just thought this was an interesting side note. Really nice, kind of cool artwork on this. With Susie and the Banshees, Hyena, released that on that in 1984 with special guest Robert Smith on guitars and keyboards. All right, moving along here. As I said at the beginning of this, some of these will be more well-known, some of these artists, and others not so much. Of course, this gentleman is extremely well-known, the late, great David Bowie. This came out in 1983. Of course, the title on this, Let's Dance. There he is, dressed up as a boxer for whatever reason. There with his Everlast gloves, etc. This was produced by a guy named Nile Rodgers. He was an American guy, predominantly known throughout the 70s with a lot of funk, R&B artists like Parliament, disco artists like Chic. And then into the 80s, he did some other stuff, like, of course, like David Bowie in Excess. Yeah, so pretty well-known producer. Even the B-52s, he did one or two albums by the B-52s when they were in their prime. But this album, it's kind of I'd call this stylish, synthesized post-disco music, really. I mean, this came out after Scary Monsters, and it's completely different than Scary Monsters. Scary Monsters, of course, featuring the ballad Ashes to Ashes, and you know the title track, Scary Monsters, if you're a David Bowie enthusiast like myself. This was a real mishmash of styles. There's a horn section on here that's really good. Again, it's like, I call this like a post-disco dance music, but it's really stylish. It's got this, of course, the unmistakable synth beats, which, you know, of course, 80s stuff. So here's the inside. You know, that's just the lyrics, and there's some photos of Bowie, of course, on the inside. But yeah, the big songs, three of these were super big hits. China Girl, of course, Let's Dance, and Modern Love. Those three songs you've heard probably several times. If you haven't, you're living under a rock, because those are huge, huge tunes. But side two of this album, I think, sometimes gets missed, you know, because we always think of those three major hits. Side two on this album, there's a song called Ricochet. Of course, he was on EMI America, this pressing on there. Cat People was in the movie Cat People. David Bowie had a part in that. It was this vampire movie with Natasha Kinski in the early 80s. And he did that song. Of course, you can see here, there it is, produced by Nile Rodgers and David Bowie. Yeah, Ricochet. And there's a cover of, there's another band from England, speaking of new romantic bands, called Metro. They were a band with a guy by the name of Duncan Brown was their lead singer. They do a cover of Criminal World. That's again, a Metro song, and that's a cover. But yeah, Cat People, Ricochet, and Shake It, rounding the album out. It's, again, it's a really good album. Side two, much different than side one. Side one containing all the hits. But yeah, it's really good. Hugely popular, but well deserving of its popularity. Again, David Bowie, Let's Dance, 1983, the release on that one. All right, moving on. Right around the same period. This is the Eurythmics, of course, featuring Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox, D&A. And there's Annie right there holding a heart. And yeah, on the back, it's kind of hard. It's in cursive, all the track listing here. So Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox had a history before the Eurythmics. This is actually the Eurythmics' second album. Most people think it's their first. They had another album just before this called In the Garden. It was a bit of a commercial flop. I don't have it. It had a couple of moments, but it's not something I would be seeking out. I didn't at the time, and I still to this day won't. But prior to the Eurythmics, the two of them were in a band called The Tourists in the late 70s. The Tourists had 3 albums. They had one major hit, I Only Want to Be With You, and that was a cover of course, the Dusty Springfield, who did the original of that. That's really worth seeking out. It's an excellent song. So Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox became romantically involved, so the story goes, and it didn't, some issues with the band, it just didn't pan out, and the tourists disbanded. And of course, out of the ashes of that, the two core members, Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox, forming the Eurythmics. So this has a definite focus on keyboards, synthesizers, drum machines. It's all that 80s stuff on display here, but it works. Dave Stewart was a wizard in the studio, an excellent producer. And of course, later on, after the Eurythmics disbanded, he would go on to be a successful producer, working with the likes of, commercial artists of Stevie Nicks, Tom Petty, even produced a Bob Dylan album. So yeah, Dave Stewart, multi-instrumentalist, great in the studio, and of course he produced this as well. And as I said, this was released in 1983. Here's a bunch of photos on the inside. Beautiful Annie Lennox right there. There's Dave and some kind of marionette. Yeah, just he was the musician behind this, and she was the vocalist. I mean, there's no denying it. She's one of the best female vocalists, certainly in my lifetime. And this album is really representative of what she could do. Of course, title track, Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. There's a song called Jennifer, a lesser known song on here. Look up this song, Jennifer. It's totally a departure from the rest of this album. It's a slow burner, about 5 minutes in length. It plays like, if you're familiar with any of the 4AD artists, like Dead Can Dance or Cocteau Twins, like Elizabeth Fraser, if you know who she is as a singer for the Cocteau Twins. Jennifer on this, the arrangements and just the sound and the production, it sounds like it should be on a 4AD label, like on that label. It's just a really amazing song. Yeah, Jennifer, look that up. And other highlights, of course, on this, Somebody Told Me is excellent. This Is the House. I've Got an Angel. And I Could Give You a Mirror. That's another beautiful, beautiful song. Love it. And of course, Love Is a Stranger kicks this whole album off. I'm telling you, Love Is a Stranger is probably one of the best lead-in tracks on any album I've ever heard, as far as pop music goes. And here it is. This is Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. It's the Eurythmics, released in 1983. So they would go on. I'm a bit of a completist. I've got all the Eurythmics stuff. I'm not going to show it all today. But they would go on and disband around in 1989, 1990. Things started to fizzle. Annie Lennox wanted to do a solo thing. And of course, as I said, Dave Stewart was getting involved, producing other bands. And they, at the point of the recording of that album, their romance had ended, but yet they were very civil and loved to work together. And it worked out for them both. And of course, as everybody knows, Annie Lennox had a very successful solo career that's still ongoing. She's still touring and still putting out music to this day. And Dave's doing other things. So Dave Stewart, just as I like these side notes, just trivia, speaking of romance, he later, during the mid-80s, he became a couple with Siobhan Fahey. There she is. Of course, this is Bananarama. She was in that band. And they became a couple, and they actually married and raised a couple of children. I think they're still together. And of course, Siobhan Fahey would later go on in the 90s and form Shakespeare's Sister. This is their debut, I believe, Hormonally Yours. The release date on this one, 1992. So again, kind of the Mrs. Dave Stewart there, if you will. Siobhan Fahey, an excellent singer in her own right. Interesting side note there for you. Oh, we're getting near the bottom here, of course. So again, this will be a lesser known for a lot of you. This was kicking off the decade we know and love as the 80s. This came out in 1980. It's Killing Joke. Killing Joke, pulsing industrial grind, influencer of many, certainly Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, Al Jorgensen of Ministry fame. Those guys certainly, I wouldn't call them imitators, but had this album not come out, it's questionable whether those bands would even exist. Extremely influential album on many artists. 100 imitators out there. Here's the track listing on here. It kicks off with Requiem, War Dance, Bloodsport is an excellent instrumental. Of course, Change, and Complications. Any of those are worthwhile looking up. And this, again, as I said, it's a self-titled debut. Kind of really neat artwork on this. I'll take it out of the sleeve here and forgot what's inside. Oh yeah, not much in the way of liner notes on the inside here. They were on the EG label. I bought this, again, not long after it came out. I was probably freshman in high school. When I bought this at the old Sam the Record Man. All my friends in Canada would know that chain in the Sam the Record Man import section in my hometown in Brockville, Ontario. Yeah, and this might have actually been a special order I had to do at the time. But yeah, Killing Joke debut. It's an underground classic that really deserves more recognition than it gets. It's truly innovative. And again, as I've said, it's very influential. Still. All right. Changing things up, going from industrial to the Smiths. This is their third album, I should say, third studio album. And of course, it's called The Queen is Dead. And of course, I'm sporting a T today. There's the Moz right there. Morrissey, the man himself, the lead vocalist. This is, again, their third studio album. This would be, I would say, a more rockin' and not rockin' in the rock and roll sense of things. It's just a little more or less melancholy. Of course, the tongue-in-cheek, I'll spit that out, satirical, lyrical approach of Morrissey is all over this. It's really great. If you heard any of these songs, you're going to be singing in the shower. I mean, it's just one of those, you remember them because they're just great songs. And there they are in front of the Salford Lads Club right there. And yeah, there's Johnny Marr, lead guitarist. He just came out with a great solo album. It actually has echoes of Morrissey in it. I'm going to be seeking that out. I'm going to a record show in a couple of weeks. I'll be looking for the couple of Smiths albums before this. I had reissued on CD. I don't know whatever happened to my records at the time, but some things get loaned to people over the years and lost. But yeah, I'm glad I still have this. Again, beautiful gatefold sleeve, and again, here's all the lyrics. So some of the highlights on this, of course, The Queen is Dead, the title track. I Know It's Over. That's a really nice. Speaking of melancholy, Morrissey, it's melancholy, but it's really, really wonderful. The Boy with a Thorn in His Side. There's a Light That Never Goes Out. That's a really upbeat, catchy tune. Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others. Cemetery Gates. I mean, Big Mouth Strikes Again. I mean, it's just really, none of it's bad. It's all good. And here's the tracks again on the back. The Smiths, The Queen is Dead. Again, release date on this one, 1986. The album that came after this, the big single was Shoplifters of the World Unite. Trying to think of the name on that. Strange Ways, Here We Come. Good album, and that was the end of the Smiths. So it was the four main studio albums. They did have a couple of EPs, of course, lots of 12-inch singles, but those are the main four. And then after Strange Ways, Here We Come, that came out after this album, the band disbanded, and of course Morrissey went on to a very lucrative solo career on his own, and he's got a pretty big catalog at this point, and he's still doing his thing out there, and so is Johnny Marr, the lead guitarist. Not sure the other side man, the bass player and the drummer, where they ended up, but yeah, the Smiths, The Queen is Dead, not to be missed. That's why it's on this list. All right, we're all over the place here today. This is got Mike Oldfield, best known certainly from his time in the 70s. I think Mike Oldfield might have been from Montreux, Switzerland. At least that's where I think he had his studio. He was kind of a one-man band in the same vein as some of the Brian Eno stuff, if you're familiar with stuff like Music for Airports and stuff like that. This was a definite departure. So Mike Oldfield, again, like I said, the comparison to Brian Eno, though, mostly keyboards, tricks in the studio, synthesizer stuff, loops, all instrumental stuff. Again, here's a great example of his early 70s stuff. Of course, this is the legendary Tubular Bells on a compact disc version. Of course, here it is, part 1 and part 2. On the record, it was just 2 parts, 2 sides. And here it is, Tubular Bells. It was actually employed for the horror movie The Exorcist. Music from Tubular Bells was in that film, if you're familiar. I think that movie came out around 1972, 1973. Yeah, again, I just wanted to show that example of his earlier stuff. So this, again, is a total departure from that stuff. In the early 80s, he picked up a vocalist. She's from Scotland, Maggie Riley. She collaborated with him. And then he's actually got a full band here on this one, like a normal, I get 1, 2, 3, 5-piece band, including Maggie Riley right there on vocals. More of a traditional band for him. And of course, Mike Oldfield playing multi-instruments here. He's playing guitars, bass, keyboards, and does actually some backing vocals. Here's a couple of photos you can see of of this incarnation of Mike Oldfield. There he is in the studio. As I said, he could play every instrument, and an excellent producer, sound guy in his own right. With a picture of the band. This looks to be just notes from the studio, and they use this on the inside of the gatefold sleeve. Looks to be, yeah, it's just plans for different parts of the songs and the approach in the studio, and all that good stuff. So side one is an instrumental in the true Mike Oldfield sense, but what it does, it's basically it's a long extended version of the title track 5 Miles Out. There are some harmonies kind of in the background with Maggie Riley humming, but no real singing on Taurus 2. But on side 2, it's all traditional, like a band with her singing. Of course, Family Man is excellent. That's a Hall & Oates song. 5 Miles Out, and Orabadoo is also very good. But yeah, this is really good. It's something different. Mike Oldfield, 5 Miles Out, and another album that came out just after this. This one came out, I believe, in 82. Yeah, 82, and of course, it was on the Virgin Records label. The album after this is also worth seeking out. It's called Crises, Crises. Crises is in crisis in the plural sense. Very worthwhile. But again, Mike Oldfield, 5 Miles Out. Excellent. All right, we're almost at the bottom here, folks. All right, the great Paul Weller, of course, most well known. Well, I won't say most well known, but prior to the Style Council, and I believe this was their third album, third studio album when they were still hitting it hot. Of course, he was the core member and lead vocalist, founding member of the Jam, mod punk outfit in the late 70s, and arguably the most popular band in England, you could say, in the late 70s. Paul Weller, as good as the Jam was, he just had other goals and ambitions, and he didn't think his bandmates at the time in the Jam, just totally inclined to punk, were up for the task, or leaning into his R&B tastes, if you will, and he wanted to go R&B, certainly even some jazz inclinations that he had in his expanding repertoire. So that's what the Style Council does. It's got soul, it's jazzy, it's big band on stage. And again, this is called Internationalists. This is, I believe, like I said, their third album. And yeah, he founded the band with Mick Talbot. I'm not sure, Mick Talbot was in a couple of bands before. He came from the mod punk scene, but again, was up to the task of leaning in with Paul Weller and the R&B and kind of the post-punk, or not post-punk, post-mod stuff sounds of the Jam. And here they are on the back. Totally different look. There's Paul Weller, and again, there's Mick Talbot standing up there. This is really excellent. Homebreakers is the opener on this. Actually, Mick Talbot sings that one. Come to Milton Keynes, the title track, Internationalists. Shout to the Top, Walls Come Tumbling Down. That's a really excellent song, and there's a great video for that, Walls Come Tumbling Down, so you could look that one up on YouTube. But the release date on this one, again, 1985. And yeah, you can see the personnel right there. Style Council are as follows. So anyway, I'm a big Paul Weller fan. Got into his solo stuff a little later on. At the time, in the early 90s, when Paul Weller was branching out on his own, he kind of had a dead zone there between Style Council. Style Council's albums after this one did not do very well between the years 1986 and when they disbanded around 89, 90. He took a couple of years off, and then his solo career, and then next thing you know, he's playing the Reading Festival in England, and Tea in the Park, and he was a really big deal. More of a following, I'd say, in Europe than in North America, but still, people come and see him when he comes into the United States and Canada. Still, I have not seen him, but I would definitely go to see Paul Weller. He's got a huge catalog, and he will play live. He'll play some Style Council stuff too. Mixes that into his set. As I've read. Again, the release date on that one, 1985. So as I said at the beginning, this video is 10+1 because, just like I said, a Spinal Tap guitar amplifier goes to 11, and I decided, what the hell, I was listening to this album last night, and I just had to include it. Of course, it's Joy Division. Joy Division, of course, later becoming New Order after lead vocalist Ian Curtis committed suicide. They only did the first two albums. There's this one, of course, it's called Closer, and after this was Unknown Pleasures. They're both excellent albums. If I had to pick between the two of them, I would pick Closer. It's just different atmospherically. There's more, it's almost got gothic tones to it. It's very dark, Brooding. Of course, they were on the Factory record label. And there's right there. There's a great documentary on the Factory label. I just can't think of the title of it. If you go on YouTube and search Factory record label documentary, it's out there. And of course, this was produced by Martin Hannett, who was, pretty much the main guy at Factory at the time. And yeah, I've had this pretty much since it came out. It's in very good, I'd say, to near mint condition. And again, always minimalist in their artwork. Here's the track listing. Again, as I said, it's kind of a brooding, slow burn. These songs like Heart and Soul, 24 Hours is just amazing. Passover, and a little more peppy, fast-paced number here is Isolation. That's very good as well. But again, yeah, so they, after this was the Unknown Pleasures album, and then, of course, the remaining members went on to form New Order. So that's the end of the video today, folks. Kind of went a little over time. I try to keep things around 20 minutes, but here I am. I see I'm at 30. But anyway, yeah, so it's just, again, just a random video today. It's a subject matter near and dear to my heart, is the 80s. I love talking about it. It's when I was, of course, most youthful. And as I said, training for a marathon, I could use some youth right now. I'm really tired. So anyway, please, when you're watching my videos, I'd like to try to get more comments going. When I'm watching other YouTube vinyl community people, I do like to make comments. So yeah, if you like the video, or if you don't like the video, it's all subjective. Please leave a comment below and let me know. As I mentioned earlier, I am going to a record show. That's 2 weeks from today, April 10th, up in Burlington, Mass. It's only about 20 minutes from here. And hopefully going to do a meetup up there with Brian from Shamrock and Records, and the Cheap and Cheerful record collector himself, Jonathan. I know they're always a dynamic duo. So hoping to meet those guys and have a few laughs at the show. Again, that's in a couple of weeks. So I'll probably do a video after that with whatever I find there. And yeah, anyway, I'll see you at the end of the marathon. We'll go with that. Thanks, folks. Have a great weekend.